Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode on Relentless Pursuit of Purpose, where our goal is to help everyone enter into a confirmed, confident, and eternal relationship with the source of all life and purpose. If you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you never miss a video or an interview. This won't really be an interview tonight, but I got one of my speakers for the Proof for the Truth conference here with me tonight. Let me just pull this up real quick. So for those that don't know, haven't seen everything all over social media, the Proof for the Truth conference will be starting tomorrow, April 21st. It's going to be all day Saturday, but Friday night it's going to be a lot of Q&A after a brief opening talk by myself. If you have not already registered, there is still time to do so. Go to proofforthetruth.org, proofforthetruth.org. It's only $50, $30 for under 21. And we would love to see you there. All right. Brandon, how you doing?
Good. Tired, but good.
Yeah.
How about you?
Same here. Yeah, every year I say I ain't gonna be doing this conference no more because it's a lot of work by yourself. So
Yeah.
but if God keeps getting glory out of it, then we'll see.
This year 4?
It's the fourth one, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
And you were there for the beginning.
I think we were together when you first came up with the idea, right?
Yeah, we were.
Was it
We were
Florida?
actually serving with another apologetics organization.
Yeah, yep.
Yep. Well, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and then we'll jump in.
Sure, yeah. So Brandon Cleaver, right now I serve as the program director for the Matthew 5-9 Fellowship, and we work with pastors and leaders around the nation to help them faithfully navigate these issues that cause toxic polarization and division in our country as a whole, in our communities, and in our churches. So that's sort of my main job. But like Brother Alex here, I've been an itinerant speaker and writer for many years. So I still do speaking here and there, and write for different publications like Our Daily Bread and the Main Street Daily News. Um, yeah, hopefully got a book, a co-written book coming out. Hopefully 2024, we'll see.
All right.
But I'm trying to get like you, man. You already got one on the shelf, so
Nah, I need more. I got so many in my head that I don't have time to get out.
yeah. But yeah, that's about it. Got um, my wife and I have four kids, all the way from 13 to 1. So that's part of why I'm tired right now. But it's a blessing. It's a blessing.
Yes, yes, man. Well, yeah, it's a blessing to be able to do ministry with people that you can truly call brother.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm looking forward to the conference tomorrow, April 21st, 22nd, proofforthetruth.org. All right, so just as a little teaser, we're not going to give away any talks or anything like that, but I came across this video and I want to share with y'all. If you're in the comments, if you have any thoughts, questions, feel free to put them in there. And we're only going to watch probably the first couple minutes because it'll give us enough to kind of jumpstart the conversation. But this was actually from a TED talk someone gave about just all the questions that are unanswered or that can't be answered by his admission. So here we go.
On a typical day at school, endless hours are spent learning the answers to questions. Right now, we'll do the opposite. We're going to focus on questions where you can't learn the answers because they're unknown. I used to puzzle about a lot of things as a boy. For example, what would it feel like to be a dog? Do fish feel pain? How about insects? Was the Big Bang just an accident? I mean, is there a God? And if so, how are we so sure that it's a he and not a she? Why do so many innocent people and animals suffer terrible things? Is there really a plan for my life? Is the future yet to be written? Or is it already written? We just can't see it. But then, do I have free will? Who am I anyway? Am I just a biological machine? But then, why am I conscious? is consciousness? Will robots become conscious one day? I mean, I kind of assume that someday I would be told the answers to all these questions. Someone must know, right? Guess what? No one knows.
No one knows.
Well, somebody knows. Somebody knows.
Somebody knows. So let's just as a little teaser exercise, let's walk through just a couple things he said. Let me see here. Well, one kind of more philosophical question. Do you think that people just wonder about things so much that they end up giving up?
They wonder about things. I think it can produce a state of paralysis in a way where um, they feel like they don't have enough information. Well, it's not that they don't have enough information, but they don't have the excuse that we'll hear a lot of times is that people don't have like a certainty about something. But it's not that we need a certain amount of. It's not that we need complete information about something, but we need an appropriate amount of information to place our trust or our faith in something. I mean, we do this every day, right?
Right.
Like I can't tell you half of how my car works, but I have enough trust and faith in it that when I push that button or whatever, that the ignition is going to start, and it's going to get me to point A from A to B and whatnot. So I mean, you can think of all different types of examples, but I think for the most part, like it can often be an excuse that if there are any questions that remain, then I can't place my trust or my faith in X. But I think if we take that mindset and put it towards anything in our life, we will never have exhaustive knowledge of anything. And so we have to ask ourselves, so what's our real reason then not placing our trust? And if we aren't placing our trust in X, then what are we actually trusting in?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because everyone, whether they use that word or not, they have faith in something. They believe
Yeah.
things that they don't have, like you said, exhaustive knowledge of. Both of us fly often. I don't know how to think. I know generally how it works, but I don't know what all of them buttons do. And so, but you get in this big hunk of metal and you fly 30,000 feet in the air you fall asleep.
Yeah.
Like that's how much trust and faith we have. But then when it comes to something that we can actually investigate, people are like, oh no, I need to see I need God to literally write it in front of me before me to believe it. So somebody said you can have sufficient evidence without having exhaustive evidence.
Yeah.
Court trials work the same way. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond, perfect certainty. So yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. All right. So he said, kind of the question, is there a God? And, no one knows, and this type of thing. And so we don't have time to go through every argument, but what are some kind of quick go-tos for you when you're trying to tell people or help people see, no, there's pretty decent evidence that God exists. In fact, that makes more sense of things than not having God in the picture.
Yeah, I think two of the ones that I think that most people can understand without having to go into deep philosophically is obviously the moral argument, because pretty much everyone, unless you have like some severe mental or emotional issue, then we all have some type of standard of morality. Now, what we base that morality in, that standard in, or who we juxtapose it against, is another story, right? So I think talking about the moral argument is one that I often go to, and then also probably cosmology. I think he mentioned like the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Right? And I love how it's always funny how Frank Turek in his New York way he says, not what does he say? It's not a question of if there's a Big Bang, it's who banged it, right? And I mean, if you look at that and juxtapose it against what we find in Genesis, where God says, in the beginning, there was a beginning, then we understand how the universe is expanding and all the different parts of that, which maybe we can get into some more detail tomorrow about. But all of this points to the fact that the universe had a beginning and the universe had a first cause as well. And so those are some of the things that I like to point out. Yeah, those are some of my sort of go-tos. So how about you?
No, I agree with those too. And cosmology, I think it's actually a lot easier to show God exists
Yeah.
than to prove Christianity is true.
Mm.
I think when we look at the scientific evidence, to me at this point, it's like, unless you just have a real strong presupposition against supernatural or anything in that realm,
Right.
and then that actually causes, to me, it causes a lot of atheists to do some verbal gymnastics in order to try to justify what really can't be justified. You mentioned morality, but if there is no God, morality is just a made up belief. It's just a made up thing. It's not real. There is no real moral law. There is no real good or evil,
Yeah.
except for what we decide it to be. But it's not objective at that point. And so, somebody can disagree with God being the root of that. But then my question is, okay, well, what is the root? What is the grounding of that?
Right.
How are you grounding your moral law?
Yeah.
I mean, we're roughly the same age, and morality has changed so much in our lifetime.
Goodness, yes.
It changed like last week. But
yeah. I mean, that's true, man. It's I'm trying to think who said. I was trying to think of this one quote that has always, I would say, has always stuck with me until now, of course. But someone talked about, I can't remember now. But anyway, they were saying essentially, you can have your morality, but if there isn't an objective standard, then who says that the right morality to have is one that will reflect the beliefs of like Mother Teresa or Hitler? You know what I mean? And so at this point, it's the point you made is exactly true. Like if it's not objective, then what are you basing it on? And is it a might versus right, type of deal where if you think about what happened in Germany, there was a certain morality that was espoused, but it was because of there was a overwhelming amount of power in one direction, so that became the right sort of right thing to do. And there's this book that I remember we read in at Biola called Ordinary Men, and it was about these ordinary folks in Germany. I mean, it was like librarians, cooks, all these types of folks who joined this specific battalion to help with the Holocaust. And it was all about how that the morality that was exuded by Hitler and these folks, they imbibed as well and reflected. So anyway, that's just piggybacking your point about the importance of objective morality versus subjective.
Yeah, it is. There's a little bit of this in one of my talks for the weekend, but just this idea, we can call it the myth of human goodness. I think generally people think people are generally good, and people think that you just need to let us choose our identity or do this, or just let us do what we do. Most people are good people, and so you don't have to worry about it. But the data doesn't back that up. And I forget the whole social issues. I'm talking about actual criminality, violence. We tend to think, oh, that's those bad people over there. And sometimes it is. But genocide researchers all say it's the average member of a population that, like you said, kind of goes goose stepping along with the genocide or with whatever is happening. It's not just the Hitlers and the people of that nature. It's the regular everyday person who normally would say, I'm not capable of this.
Yeah.
And it just reveals the true heart of man. So yeah, I think there's a definite myth of our goodness.
Yeah.
So he also, go ahead.
So what was the question that he asked about? What did he say about? What was the one he said at the beginning? Something about a dog or a fish or?
Yeah, do dogs feel pain, or what does it feel like to be a dog? Yeah,
we can probably skip over those.
yeah. But we can come to one other question he brought, and we don't have a time to do a deep-throated, a deep dive into this topic as far as the problem of evil, suffering, all that. I mean, half the books are on up here. So like that's the one that I don't know if we'll ever have solutions, but I think there are some good answers in Christianity. But he did bring up, why do what do you say? Why do bad things happen to good people? Type of thing. Why is there animal suffering and these types of questions? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just alluded to part of it when you talked about what did you say, the myth of the good
Human goodness,
the good person. Yeah, my first question is, well, what do we mean by good, right? So if we mean if our standard again is comparing ourselves to criminals or whatever that we see on TV, well, yeah, we'll always look good in comparison to that, someone who's committing murder or whatever. But if we're comparing it to our Creator, who created the universe, who created us, who knows us, what does the Psalms talk about? Every hair on our head.
Yeah.
If He's the objective standard and He is all holy, then whenever we do something that goes against His moral law, then we are sinning, and that means we are not. We have a sinful nature. We are not good in the sense of absolving ourselves from any type of what do I want to say?
Like punishment?
What do you say?
Punishment or penalty?
Yeah, I was gonna say ramifications, but yeah, punishment or penalty. And so, so the question is then, how do we, how do we rectify this situation? And it's something that we can't do of ourselves. So I think one of the best things about Christianity is that when you think about Jesus Christ and what the life that He lived, and what He ultimately went through on the cross. I remember my buddy Abdu. He said it like this. He said, the value of something. The value of the worth of something by what one is willing to pay for it. And Jesus paid the ultimate price to show that we are of ultimate worth to Him. And so when you're thinking about different religions, for me, I don't see how any religion would come close to solving the problem of evil in the way that Jesus did by taking it on upon Himself, which He didn't have to do. But He did it of His own selfless, nature. So
that's a really good point. He did it of His own free will, right?
And that was another question.
That's a good segue to the next one is, do I have free will? And I always think it's interesting when people are posing this question, because your ability to pose the question was either free or not free.
Yeah.
Which means, did you really pose? So anyway, it becomes like a infinite regress of, I don't know where we are,
Right. So if we didn't have, if we don't have free will, and we didn't have the free will to ask the question, so what does that mean about the answer then?
Right.
Why do I even care about the result of the answer if all of it is mechanized anyway? So
right. And the thing is, we tend, I think some things we as a people, society, we make it harder than it has to be. I think free will is pretty obvious. I know in some Christian circles, there's debates on different ways to look at free will, but I just think a couple things. A, if we don't have free will, then not only, well, there can be a moral law, but we can never hold anybody accountable to it.
Yeah.
Because if we're just, as Dawkins says, marching to the tune of our DNA, and we're not really in control of ourselves in a cognitive way, then what are you blaming me for? I didn't have a choice. My molecules just told me to do what I did.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be reality. So I think sometimes we can, we don't need a whole lot of books for this one. We can look at reality and say, well, this person just admitted to this crime. They told us how they planned it and why. That seems like a lot of thought and forethought. It seems like they were free in those decisions and in those thoughts. That's probably where we should go with.
Yeah.
And if we don't go with that, then can we even blame them for doing something that they had no control over?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what is your thoughts on free will and just how do you think about it when you're thinking about it?
Well, I would agree with what you just said. Like you said, there's some different depending on if one's Arminian, Calvinist, Monist, all that kind of stuff. Some people might look at it differently, and they'll like the Calvinists will talk about moral agency, versus free will. But I just think that the biggest thing for me is that the Bible makes it clear that we are held accountable for our actions, that we do have a sinful nature, but even so, that we have the ability to uh, use our free will to bring harm or to help. You know what I mean? And that choice is something that we're again held accountable for. And
Right.
so if we didn't have free will, um, then I don't think that God would make it very clear that we will be held morally accountable for our actions. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And it makes it, well, this kind of leads into another question. I've been feeling like, or I feel like, so you and I were in this quote unquote truth telling business, which can be uncomfortable at times.
Mhm.
And in that, do you feel people avoid or choose not to align with truth because sometimes the truth doesn't meet our expectations? So, for example, some people may expect marriage to be a certain way, and then it may not have even been a way it was ever intended to be, but this is what they've been told, and then they expect that it doesn't turn out to be that, and then they're disappointed. But you're disappointed based on a faulty assumption, right? um this idea that if something is true, almost I should feel good about that.
Mhm.
But to me, it's a weird, forget religion for a second, that's just a weird thought to me as the more I think about it, because why should truth function that way, A?
Yeah.
And B, I've been told a lot of things that were true and a lot of things that I didn't want to do that I was told to do and needed to do, but they didn't make me feel good,
Yeah.
but it was still true and it was still right. So do you think, because we're so feelings heavy now, do you think that sometimes people are expecting something that was never to be expected?
Yeah, and your question actually reminds. So my talk on Saturday is heavy on epistemology, on knowledge and truth and facts and discerning that and how it looks in our contemporary age. So I want to be careful about how much I say right
Mhm.
now, but it does remind me of this one quote from James Baldwin, where he says, "It's astonishing the lengths to which a person will go to avoid a truthful mirror." And
Wow.
I think what he's getting at there is the fact that, to be frank, truth hurts a lot of times. We do have a certain expectation, or we do have something that we desire to be true, and
Right.
when that expectation, when that desire isn't met, then we do oftentimes try to find reasons um, to not to not yeah to not I guess go in line with that line of reasoning. I mean, you hear it in the stories of people, even uh, when they're looking at different religions and investigating Christianity, and they come to a point where they're like, man, a lot of this is making sense. I didn't expect to find this, and it's kind of tripping me up now. And one thing that you'll hear a lot of people point to is the fact that, once you Christianity does make certain demands on you,
Mhm.
that if you call yourself a disciple of Christ, then there's a certain way that we are expected to act, not perfectly, but that's why Paul calls us ambassadors of Christ, right?
Mhm.
Because everything, our the way that we talk, the way that we treat people, everything about us should exude Christ, just as the original call for the from Yahweh to the Israelites was that they would be a light to other nations. That hasn't changed. That you and I are lights we're reflecting Christ. What's the one? What's the guy's? I can't remember the guy's name, but I know you've heard this before. He said that there are five gospels. There's
Mhm.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the
Mhm.
fifth one is yourself. Most people won't read the first four, but they will read the fifth one. So
Yeah.
you remember his name?
Yeah, Bobby Conway. Well, The quote's not from him, but he wrote a book called The Fifth Gospel based on that quote.
Oh, he did. Oh, okay, yeah. It was like I want to say it was like an Irishman or something from
Yeah, I believe it was. I
hundreds of
forgot
years
his name
ago.
too.
But yeah, people do have certain expectations, and that does make, especially in our age now, right, the social media age, where we're inundated every day with misinformation, with malinformation, with disinformation, all these types of untruths, and it's hard for us to discern what's true. And I'll give you one more thing from the social media tip. There was this documentary called The Social Dilemma. One of the things, of course, it talked about was this attention economy, that social media demands our attention in a way that's not only implicit, but also insidious in many ways. And we often think that let's say it's a political season and we're trying to discern between candidates, right? We often think that we're doing our due diligence by trying to look into these different candidates, but the algorithms are really feeding us what we already know and what we already desire. There's been some research to show that's how something like the January 6th insurrection could happen, because a lot of quote unquote normal folks, however one wants to describe that, went from everyday folks to these extremists that are scaling, the Capitol building, because they got further and further down this rabbit hole, from fairly innocuous stuff to more extremist stuff that they now believe was actually true. So that kind of goes off your question a little bit, but truth is at a premium right now.
Oh, man, if it was ever, yeah. You said something. You reminded me. I was interviewing Dr. Craig a few weeks ago, and I asked him, "What's the biggest fallacy you see in society? That as your work as a philosopher, what are you seeing?" And I know a lot of the fallacy names, as we all do, and I was waiting for which one he was going to pick, and he said the biggest issue currently is over information. Specifically with the younger generation, because of what you just said. And I remember doing research for an article I was writing some years ago, and in that I found that somebody living in the 15th century would have to live their entire lives to be exposed to the amount of information we get on a day.
Wow, that's crazy.
Now, we're not getting good information all day, we're just getting quantity of information all day.
Right.
But then, to your point, this is the problem, because we're asking undeveloped teenage minds to sift through the internet, like all of it, and figure out what's true. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, the over, it's funny because we used to think that, man, we just need more information to get to people so that people can all be smarter and then everything's better. The whole world will be better.
Yeah.
It didn't quite work out that way.
God's like, all right, you think that's the answer? But no, I mean, to your point, the French mathematician Blaise Pascal, he said that truth, and I think he's writing this hundreds and hundreds of years ago. He said that truth is so obscured nowadays and lies so well established that unless we know truth, it's hard for us to even recognize it. And again, he wrote this hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But how prevalent and relevant is that for us today? At the beginning of my talk tomorrow, I won't do it now, but I have some statistics that I want to read out to just show how much misinformation is out there these days. And where before, growing up, you and I, we would have to go to a library and do our research. What's the little cards you have to pick up to go find your
catalog?
Yeah. But now we can just go, type in a question on Google and we get an answer.
Yep.
But a lot of times people just don't know if that answer is the right thing, but it's a quick answer. It's something quick that we didn't have to put a lot of energy into.
Right. Yeah. And I think, that's a really good point, because I think there's a benefit to these. I mean, obviously we're on this computer right now, we're streaming all over the world. Like, that's a benefit if used properly.
Yes.
But if I'm like, hey, I had, for example, right before we got on, I had to call the hotel and ask some questions because I was on their website and I couldn't find what I was looking for. I quickly Googled, okay, what's the hotel name, phone number, boom. That's a good use of that. But if I wanted to Google, is Christianity true? And I get an answer and I'm like, oh, okay, well, first article popped up, I got my answer. No, it's not good. I wouldn't even do that with, I mean, atheism or I wouldn't do that with anything. You can't get an entire worldview downloaded to you in one click of a Google, so yeah. I think we've all just gotten lazy. That's what it is.
Well, it's a question of stewardship, like you said. I mean, we're giving these. I am sort of a personally. I am sort of a social media curmudgeon. That's just me personally. But like whenever I talk to people about social media and our digital devices, it's not a question of like, should you use it or shouldn't you use it, right? It's a question of you are called to represent Christ no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're using. And so it's a question of stewardship. So how are you using your platform on social media, or how are you using your digital device, to the glory of God and to the fellowship and flourishing of other human beings? So that's the question I think that we have to ask ourselves and think about what does digital discipleship really look like, and how am I reflecting that?
You need to coin that. Digital discipleship.
Well, we actually have an event coming up June 8th, so I'm gonna invite you to it. So
okay. No, that's really good. Digital, I like that. So I was going to ask another question. This is still semi-related. That, like I said, you and I are in the truth-telling business. I remember my professor in ministers training class at church some years ago. He said, to be a minister, to be a Christian, really, but definitely to be a minister, we're countercultural, all the time. And it's not a comfortable place to be all the time. That's why we need each other. But when you're constantly, the river's running this way and you're saying it should go that way, that's a hard way to live. That's not a complaint for anyone listening. But what I do want to ask is, being in this position that you're in, that I'm in, how do you navigate? I've said it on this channel numerous times. Anybody can get it. I don't mean it as a threat. I mean, sometimes there may be a thing that is not true, or based on my research is not true, that I will have to stand up against, but it may be coming from somebody who I generally agree with.
Right.
And vice versa. There may be somebody who I generally don't agree with, but they're saying something true right now. And so I don't want to push them down because the thing that they're saying is true. Long story short, how do you go about navigating these spaces that we're in where you want to stay clear to the truth? And I don't just mean the gospel, but I mean everything that surrounds the gospel as well. Whether we're talking about social justice, CRT, or these different conversations, not necessarily advocating, but just trying to stay on target with the truth. How do you navigate that?
That's a good question, because in some ways it is contextual. It depends on what the subject or the issue is. I think some have greater, some have a different level of impact than others. Because I know, like, for example, the whole CRT kerfluffle that has taken place, particularly within evangelicalism. Much of that was much ado about nothing, really. It really is. And I could give a whole nother talk on it. In fact, I have given a talk on CRT before, but that's much ado about nothing. But if it's something that involves like the I'm trying to think of an example. If it's something that involves like the something about like the identity of Christ, or like, for example, remember the movie Zeitgeist that came out, and like you remember that?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Zeitgeist was a 2-part movie, I think, that came out like I want to say the early 2000s or something like that. And it sort of took culture by storm, because the first part of that, the second part was about, I think, some conspiracies with, I believe it was with 9/11 or something like that. But the first part was all about the how Christianity was adopted from these ancient Egyptian gods and all of that, and a lot of people hadn't heard that, and so like a lot of Christians was like up in a this is like a big deal for them, and they were starting to question their faith, right?
Mhm.
And so something like that to me is like more dire. Like that's something that we gotta address because it can affect people's relationship with God. It can and all that. So it can affect the it could put up more obstacles to Christianity that shouldn't doesn't need to be there. So number one, I think is contextual. Number two, I do think we have to be discerning about sometimes there's an imbalance that we have in orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Excuse me. Sometimes our desire to be right is not worth our the way that we go about sort of being right. You know what I mean? Like sacrificing relationships and stuff like that. Um, we yeah. Anyway, I've seen it a lot with Christianity, and I think we have to be careful and discerning, um, because for a lot of people, they're on. I mean, if we think back at our faith on our faith journeys, it took a while for God to get us from point A to point B. There's a lot of different people that He brought into our lives. You know what I mean? A lot of different circumstances and whatnot. And so, um, when I look back at on my faith journey, I'm like, man, the Lord had a lot of grace and mercy on me for a large part of this. And so I think that we have to be careful in extending that grace and mercy to others as well. So I think it's a lot of it is contextual, Alex, and yeah. So I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. On that makes it easier and harder depending on the situation, because if we're in a context where we are the minority, well, which is often the case, it can be harder to speak up and align with truth in some situations. And so, like you said, knowing how to maneuver in those situations, we might need to do a master class on that. How do
And
you
yeah, and I mean, to your point, I mean, we have to have an appreciation of truth in the first place. That's why, I felt like, okay, I need to create a talk and talk specifically about that because, we think about in John 18, where of course Pilate and Jesus has the back and forth. Jesus tells him, that that what did he say that those
those who
who
know the
hear
truth?
my voice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then of course Pilate says, "Well, what is truth?" And he walks away. And I think that question is one that has a lot of cultural relevance for us right now. Um, even we don't. The Bible doesn't say whether he walked away dismissively or he necessarily asked it rhetorically. I think we can assume maybe there was a dismissive attitude there, a bit like, "What is truth?" But I do think that dismissive attitude is what we find in our contemporary culture. And because it's dismissed, it is a dismissive posture towards it, um, is why part of why so many people are being manipulated because they don't have an appreciation of truth and all that entails. And again, with the being inundated with misinformation all the time, it just adds to it. So
Yeah, it does. And I think, as you mentioned, misinformation, I think some of it can be more noticeable,
yeah,
or once people bring it to the forefront, we can all, generally on some stuff say, "Oh yeah, that was totally a wrong lie," or "That was totally off." But I think there's a more subtle attack from the enemy in not well, it is misinformation, but it sounds good as misinformation. And what I'm saying is the mantras of the day: live your truth, you are enough. I did an interview with Alyssa Childers on her book Live Your Truth, and she kind of went through some of these slogans and debunked them. But we hear this all the time now. You are enough. It sounds positive. It sounds affirming, right? Live your truth. That sounds affirming. Um, you know, um, look inside yourself and find. All these types of things. They sound they don't sound evil, right? It's
Yeah.
not like some of the other stuff we hear where it's misinformation, but it's more of a sinister nature, I guess.
Yeah.
So what would you say to the public, to people listening, especially with those with parents, those with kids, when these phrases are going around and they're tacked on the school doors, but really live your truth is probably one of the worst messages of the day to me. Um, Telling people you're enough is only setting them up for failure, because they're going to eventually realize they're not enough.
Yeah.
And then what? They're going to feel like a personal failure. You tell somebody, look inside yourself. I used to say, when I talk about pantheism or polytheism, people were saying, look in yourself, look in yourself. I'm like, well, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't have to ask the question.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So, like, when you hear some of these kind of more subtle misinformation things, what do you say about those?
So, man, I feel like I'm going through my whole talk today. I'm supposed to talk about that tomorrow.
Nah, okay. Don't give it all away.
All right, yeah. I'll say this. I'm gonna push back a little bit on. So I'll say this: different phrases have different implications for sure. So I think that the live your truth is much more insidious than someone saying, I'm speaking my truth. And let me explain why. So live your truth, the connotation there is that whatever you believe is true or what makes you happy or whatever, that is how you should live your life. Um, so that could have dangers because again, we talked about this earlier, but what's that standard then? Like what is actually making you happy? Is what makes you happy maybe bring someone else harm. So at that point, then who's right and who's wrong? Okay. So anyway, we can go further down that rabbit trail, but you can see like the subjective nature of that is problematic. I do think that if someone is saying, I want to be careful because I don't want to get too much of a talk away, but I want to be careful. Well, the my truth is different to me because context does matter a little bit. That strongly emerged from the Me Too movement, and like a lot of movements have very a lot of positives and bad things as well. But I'll say one of the positives that came from Me Too was that a lot of women did feel like they finally had the power and the ability to speak up from a lot of the different types of assault that they had experienced. I mean, I personally know well over a dozen women who've been assaulted in numerous kinds of ways and just felt that they didn't have the power or the ability to come forward and say that. And this seeing other women do that did give them the strength to do this. So I want to acknowledge that I do think that phrase emerged from that. Now, what I do think is problematic though is that the my part, if you want, it can be harder to get people to believe it when there's that subjective element to the phrase my truth. If it's your truth, does that just mean it's a truth or does that mean it's the truth? You know what I mean? So for me, I would encourage people to say like, this is the truth that I experienced or something like that. You know what I mean? Or this is, you know what I mean? Like something that had more objectivity to it. Because a lot of times people are looking for reasons to discount what you have to say anyway. And so when you phrase it in a way that gives them more fodder, it only adds to the skepticism that someone might have, and where you originally felt empowered because there might be some action that's taking towards this injustice that you're speaking about, you're actually doing more harm or not moving the goalposts forward. Anyway, so that's a little bit on that. So.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I appreciate that. Just a couple more, and then we'll be out of here for tonight. But this is kind of in relation to that. If truth or whatever is accepted as truth continues to shift, if what's happening now continues to happen, and really it's not just happening, it's accelerating. ever since, what was it, 2016, when the word of the year was post-truth.
Post truth. Yeah.
People are doing their best to live that thing out. I'm like, man. But with that being the way it is, where is the line in the sand? And I don't know if you can say it, but it's kind of a question that the world needs to answer, I guess. Is there a starting point to come back to, if need be, with regards specifically to the moral law? Because it's weird now. You hear like Bill Maher and other people, super progressive liberal people, speaking out against some stuff that their quote unquote party is supposed to be about, or especially with the trans issue,
Yeah.
and just the acceleration of all that. I'll just say that. There was a story. Actually, there was a clip I was watching, and this is not to co-sign Jordan Peterson for everybody who's watching, but in this particular clip, he was talking about this one lady who had said, "Yeah, one of my kids is trans, and one of my kids is pansexual," and he just broke down the numbers. Like, statistically, there's no way. What it is a parent going along with the zeitgeist of the day, as you talk about it, and they're pushing this. And they may not even realize they're pushing it. But there's just statistically, there's no way that less than 1% of the population is this way, and you got 2 in your house. That it's just not possible. So now it's this thing. It's almost fashionable. It's a weird thing to be fashionable with, using your kids in that way, or thinking you're helping them in that way. But so now my point is, you see other people who normally, once again, like they would normally be on that side, and now they're starting to say, wait, like y'all got to chill, this is too much. But once the rock has started rolling down the hill, how do you stop it? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when the post-truth era kind of comes in, the line is shifting. Where is there a stopping point, or do you see one, or do you think there will be one, or what is that going to look like?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm not sure, what that stopping point would be. I will say this though. I wouldn't fall into sort of a nihilistic despair about it.
Yeah.
First of all, as Christians, we are ultimately, we have our frustrations. Lord knows I have my frustrations with the culture and stuff like that. But we should have ultimately our posture should be one of hope. Because if our postures are one of hope, then our messages won't be one of hope either. And so that does not mean that we are not to speak to the issues of the day, to speak to the concerns and cares, and care for us in this, care for people in this world, those impoverished physically, spiritually, mentally, whatever that is. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that ultimately we have to be hopeful people. And so, if we think about history, there's been a lot of different, we got the Greco-Roman culture. I'm sure, that was in their heyday. You had the Athenian culture. Of course, the classical time had passed a little bit once Paul got there. The whole when he was at the Areopagus and whatever. But Plato and Aristotle, they were gone by then. But there were all these ages where there were certain mantras, and back then the Stoics and the Epicureans were such a big part of the sort of wisdom class at that time. It was their what do you say?
No, I said right.
Yeah, it was their two perspectives that often dominated thought. And so the society has waves and and things like that. You had the postmodern age, we're in the post-truth age, and so I do think there will be a stopping point or shifting towards something else. But I don't know if that shift is going to be towards something better than this or worse than this, to be honest. But again, our point is to understand the culture and contextualize the message of Christ and Christianity to what's going on in the culture. And for us, as literally people who pledge our allegiance and our faith to the living embodiment of truth, we have to be people and lovers of truth. Um, and so we have to be folks who, speak in a way with conviction, but also with compassion. Um, yeah, and so I think that's how we need to navigate culture. But yeah, I don't know. I wish I could point to like, yeah, I think that this is going to be over in so many years. And I'm honestly not sure like what's the best way to other than doing the opposite of what's going on now. And
Mhm.
that's really being ardent about um just about being as truthful as possible, like putting that to the forefront all the time. I don't know, what else could be helpful. You have any thoughts on that?
Nope.
Okay.
No, it's I think it's gonna get worse. Usually things get worse before they get better,
Yeah.
but worse for the people who think that what I think is worse is better, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. So the people who think that the direction we're going now is good, it's gonna get bad for them.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the sad part, the sad irony, because you and I both, we're telling people truth because we love them. Sometimes love them more than they love themselves, although they won't necessarily believe that. Um, but that is the essence. Otherwise, I don't care. I wouldn't say nothing to nobody. Like if I didn't have this holy mandate, I wouldn't say anything. I don't want to upset people's day.
Yeah.
But I also don't want you to die in your sin.
Yeah.
You know. But I think when we're looking at, let's say, with this one particular issue with the detransitioning movement,
Mhm.
it's not being publicized a lot because it doesn't fit the narrative, obviously. But the reality is, a lot of these early operation kids, we'll call them,
Mhm.
they were 13, 14, parents trying to be super woke, and they were, oh yeah, let's do this for Timmy. And then a few years later, Timmy's like, oh yeah, I still do want to be a boy. I changed my mind. I don't want to change to a girl anymore. But you already started the process.
Yeah.
You're growing things that you don't supposed to grow, and you can't undo that. When enough of that happens, and I don't want that to be the case, people are gonna, because this is permanent damage to children.
Yeah.
Like, so I think stuff like that will force people to wake up, but I hope and pray we don't have to go that far to wake up.
Yeah. And
So
part of the problem too is well, I won't go too far down this, but you know, we prioritize happiness over holiness.
mm,
And, but as we know, what makes us happy 1 second, can change with the whims of culture, with time, of circumstance.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm thinking about even some celebrities. I won't go through naming them and all that. Get all that in your algorithm.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about just some celebrities, and it's not just celebrities. I mean, obviously they're in the forefront, but it's everyday folks too. And I was talking to I want to be as anonymous as possible. I was talking to a parent whose child has had some of these gender dysphoria
Mm,
issues, and originally this person was more of the mindset they um, that they would get them as much help as possible, that they wouldn't just sort of give into it because this is what their child wanted to do. But over time, um, seeing what others were doing, and also believing that this would ultimately, and I'm using this is the exact words, make their child happy.
mm,
Um, they're like, okay, I need to accept this. Um, yeah, so I think that's what's going on a lot, and it's a tough situation as a parent, to be in. So it's not something that I think that we need to be. Um, I mean, I think we do need to hold our line on it because it's important. We do need to hold to our convictions, but we can still have compassion for those who are struggling with it, because it's tough, with your child. I mean, we both have multiple kids, and you deal with different things.
mhm.
And you got to tell them the truth about something, and sometimes the truth is going to hurt them, but it's ultimately to help them. So
Yeah. Amen to that. Amen to that. So That is it, y'all. Let me just let everybody know one more time that the Proof for the Truth conference is coming up tomorrow. There's still time to get your ticket. Go to proofforthetruth.org. It's at the bottom of the screen there for you. Proofforthetruth.org. And we will see you this weekend here in Chicago. Brandon, thank you again for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow.
Yes, looking forward to it. Be in the Windy City.
Yes, sir. All right, y'all. Have a good one. And until next time, peace.
Peace.